right. Hi, how are ya? Hey. All right. So I've got something I'm putting up right away. If you got any questions, if you got anything that you're not quite sure what the heck I'm doing, feel free to ask in the stream as we're going. And if you're watching this after the stream, please feel free to put it in the comments. We'll try to figure it out. Okie dokie. Okie dokie, Chris. That sounds great. All right. Okay. So, all right. I'm just going to clock along here and pick up right from where we left off yesterday. First, my thinking pipe. Oh yeah, baby. All right. Okay, so the last few days I've shown this. This is a example page that I did for a film company for working on their film project, and so what this has done for me is allowed me to examine and explore some of the different avenues that I could take when I'm going about illustrating stories. And I'm working traditionally in a paper format. So with that in mind, you can see a number of the different medium that are available for us to use as illustrators in order to do the thing that we do. But I'm getting like, I'm starting to act like Slavoj Zizek with the whole, because I have an irritated nose. So, okay. So the thing that we're trying to do today, if you don't know who Slavoj Zizek is, please look him up. He's fantastic. Okay. So in the course of trying to explore the avenues that I can utilize for telling stories, for exploring, different ways and means in which that we as creators can have some originality, some authenticity in the methods that we use to craft our art, to do whatever it is we're doing, whether it's an illustration, whether it's and I've specifically cited storytelling as the context here, but it's so much more broad than that. If it's sketch work, if it's workup, if it's trying to loosen ourselves up because of, the stressors and anxieties of being creative types and the necessitation of inspiration. What if I feel uninspired today? Well, that's understandable, but I don't see it as an excuse. I never have, and I never will. There's all kinds of ways to facilitate continuing working, despite the fact that today, the juice, the creative juice just isn't flowing. The energy just isn't there. I think instead I'll play some video games, or I think instead I'll do something else, and in order to get the juices pumping. And I think that my argument against that has always been, sure, the moment you start distracting yourself with something else, the moment you've stepped away from potentially working on anything. So by exploring other possibilities, so by investigating different ways in which you can start to illustrate things, maybe just playing like that will loosen you up. So that's why initially I started walking through all of this. And this is a messy business, folks, working with different material. And make sure you got clean fingies, huh? I just put a mark on the white piece of paper I haven't even started with. So yesterday, we continued this. So this is the thing that I did initially in the last year in order to show the film production that I could, do these illustrations for them and these different media, which, is one of the reasons it landed me the job. And then yesterday, I went through some more. And in yesterday's examples, and if you haven't seen my assembly of this page, because I did it during our talk yesterday, and I start at 2 every day, and I go till probably 3:30. I think yesterday I went till 4, but it's still generally the same amount of time. Now, there's a whole number of different avenues of softer materials like chalks, pastels, contes, and things like that, And if you're not sure what chalk or pastel or Conte is, again, watch yesterday's video. It's a live stream video. It should be up on my main page. It should be accessible there. And you'll see, I hold these materials up in camera so that you can see, hey, look for this thing. Because maybe you want to get dirty and use a Conte or a chalk or a chalk pastel. I don't use oil pastels, by the way, and I don't use oil paint because there's something about that makes me sick as a dog. I don't know what I'm allergic to in that, and maybe it's something in the binding material, or maybe it's something in the smell of it. I don't know, but I don't use oil pastels or oil paints. I'll use chalk pastels. I'll use sidewalk pastels, which is a transitory state between the two, but I can't use oil pastels. The smell just bugs me. And so there are things that you can do. If you can't use oil paints, but you like the idea of an oil paint finish, there are things that you can do in coating your canvases or whatever your surfaces are with varnish. Whoops, let me get that in the camera. With varnishes, satin varnishes, gloss varnishes. Satin, of course, it has that sort of soft finish to it, whereas a gloss is just nice and bright and vibrant. So, and you can also utilize these varnishes for flattening down and ostensibly compressing your visual image as one flat surface, or so that you don't see as many of the transitory layers that you might have in a drawing from using some of these different methods that I talked about yesterday. Now, yesterday I only specifically really talked about tapes, putting in either one of two things, some stamps, and you'll see that in here and in here, and you can see how working over top of pre-stamped images or working over top of pre-fashioned symbological images, like, in this context, you can start to insinuate things like butterfly wings, or you can start to try to engage in it sort of as a wallpaper pattern or like a fleur-de-lis or something like that. And that's all from one simple stamp that I used. And you can use that as a foundational base to put your drawing over top of and have some complexity of information or complexity marks underneath that helps you if you have a problem with starting with a blank piece of paper, which a lot of people do. That's what holds back a lot of creatives, and they might not consciously realize this. But what holds a lot of us back from getting going is, I don't want to wreck my pretty paper. I bought this pretty piece of paper. Look at it. It's so pristine and smooth. I don't want to make a mistake on it. Jackson Pollock was asked a question once of somebody. What do you do because Jackson Pollock, if you look him up, if you're unaware of who he is, Jackson Pollock was the person who did the drip paintings and a lot of these abstract, beautiful, deep images of layers and layers of value and gesticulation that would create these fields of movement. I'm a Jackson Pollock fan. I'm not really an abstract art fan, but I'm a Jackson Pollock fan because there's a deeper resonance in that. And there is some logistics behind how he's approaching things. So somebody asked him, what do you do if the paint that you put on, you've put on incorrectly, you've made a mistake? Which is, it's almost like a sarcastic thing. What if you flick the paint wrong, right? Well, Pollock said, I denied the mistake. I embraced the opportunity. And if there's one thing that I can say to anybody that is interested in learning to express themselves, either textually, writing, visually, musically, however it is that you want to do it, just do it. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to, oh my goodness, fantastic train wrecks of attempts that just don't work. That's part of the fun. I truly believe that. I truly believe it's part of the process. So here we have innumerable amounts of information. Now, in the last 2 days on my Instagram, and Christopher Runciman Canada from my Instagram, and my Facebook, which I think is still Runciman, or maybe it's Christopher Runciman now. I have actually scanned these and put them on in full, right on my Instagram and my Facebook. So if you want to screen capture these or save them, or however you go about doing those things. I'm not sure, but so that you can have, a copy of these, and that might help to facilitate you, so that if you get stuck or held up in some way, well, how do I start this drawing? I got all this spread of mark making clickety-clack in front of me that I can't decide how to begin. I really want to try my new pencil crayons, or I really want to try whatever. Take a look at these. I don't know if you'll see a whole bunch of different things that might defy your conventional assessment of how to look at starting your work. And I don't know. I'm not suggesting that everybody's conventional. I'm suggesting that sometimes one of the challenges of flicking through the social media things and looking at other people's art and looking at other people's finished images is that you go, wow, I want to do that. But there's no aspect of it that just sort of gives you the basic meat and potato ingredient of, well, what's that done with, right? Or what's the processes of that? So if this helps, use it, okay? Now, today, I'm going to take us a little bit farther. So, before I forget, this is a black piece of construction paper, or cardstock, a heavy grade cardstock is really what it is, with a white piece of paper over top. And this is a white piece of cardstock with a black piece of cardstock over top, okay? I'm sorry, A and B. And they've just been taped together, but if you look at them, you can see how they're not affixed to one another, other than by the tape. So it's different surfaces that we're working on here. And so I'm going to play a little bit more like that today. If there's anybody that clocks in and has questions over the course of whatever's going on today, hey, let me know. I reckon your question. Over the years, I've gone into a whole bunch of different schools from grade, from elementary school, early grade, grade 3, straight up to teaching at the local business university, the business program at the university in the city I live. And I'll go in for X amount of time, and I'll talk about storytelling, or I'll talk about comic creation, or I'll talk about how to just get started. Taking whatever facility that you have for the want to express story on paper, and how you can go about doing that. And there's all kinds of different levels of complexity that we can use by example. Now, I am going to do something a little bit different today, and bear with me for that. There's two options, and anybody that's here, if you want to put into the comments field, or the live chat, I think it's called, you're welcome to do so. But if you prefer one or the other, I'm bendable either way, but I have examples of previous pages that I've done that I have scans of in Photoshop that I can show you, that I've loaded a whole bunch of those up, or I can just get started into making some smooshy on the paper. So if anybody wants to put comments in that, please feel free to do so. I changed my desk surface area a little bit in my studio, largely because I was confining myself by the amount of working space that I have for traditional work. I just needed a little bit more space for making a mess. So I switched I have two different apparatus that I can use on my desk for pivoting the working surface. And the one that I have been using was smaller. So I went back to my big papa. And on both of those things, I placed the same clipboard that sits on top of these two surfaces and has the working field that I go with. But at the same time, this is a much more broad space. So I've returned back to a camera above instead of the scanning camera that I had, because the scanning camera had to sit too close, and so I got that out of the way. So now we got lots of room to play, and there's lots of space to do all kinds of wiggly movements. So, okay, so either way, I'm going to get to it. I've got a bunch of skiddly-doo that I've brought and put together so that we can do some modulation of a surface. And this is the principal thing that I was going to talk about today, is less about all the different sticks that you can make for making shapes in the sand, and more of the different ways that you can smush up your surface that you want to work on and with all kinds of things, including different letter sets and paper surfaces and fixable surfaces. I'm sorry, a fixable material like tapes and such, of course, again. But I've also got mediums here, some gesso here to start throwing some marks and some shapes. And yeah, lots and lots and lots. But let's slide on over to the digital lab. Let me move over 1.5 feet to where I've got the setup for looking at my Photoshop. I just want to grab one thing out of the, I got containers of paints that I keep under my desk so that I don't have to. Did I seriously just? Yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, that doesn't matter. Boy, stunning realizations kick in on you when you least expect it. I went out of my way to go and pick up something the other night, actually discovering something, a different material at the same store. And I went to go and buy some paint because I thought I was completely out of that value, and I went and found a really great pencil crayon set like this for $4 at a dollar store, and it's the full range of well, basically flesh tones for making up a pretty person facey picture. So, mind you got to put some greens and blues in there too. So, but yeah. We're not doing color today. All right. So, okay, over here, I'm going to click off my big gobbing face for a second. And because nobody needs that. That's not the right one. Okay, and I'm going to turn off the overhead and put on, buttons are hard. There we go. All right, so this is my Photoshoppy program. Now, these are examples. I'm going to take this off for a moment. Sorry about that. These are examples of images that I've published in previous books. I've done a couple of books that I call the alphabet books. And what they are, alphabetaries. And if people are unaware of what alphabetaries are, they are, I think the easiest example of how to look at those is, sometimes people find it helpful if they got the talking head. Okay. So what those are is examples of A, apple, B, boy, G, girl. And so because of the supposed disenfranchisement of culture, and so because of the supposed collapse of society that happened in the Middle Ages, a lot of people were uneducated, and a lot of the serf class, there was no investment whatsoever in any kind of education for anybody at all. It's unnecessary, relatively. So, which is why so many people lived in such a feudal state for so long. Keep them all dumb, folks. We've got a lot of that going on now. So, so I did an alphabetary, and what alphabetaries are, my alphabet books is what I call them, was every page starts with a letter. This page was A. And A, airplane. Okay? But the point I'm trying to show here isn't to walk you through every page. On the surface of this paper, you can see that there's a strange texture that's happening right here around the word balloon. All right? There is a strange modulative effect on a surface. And what that is I took tissue paper and I put a matte medium on tissue paper. And tissue paper is generally crumply, messy stuff. So when you try to affix tissue paper over top an existing heavier paper, a cardstock or something like that, it does this little edging. It does this little bits of little ribs and little definable lines that pop up. So then when I take that and I shave over it lightly with a pencil crayon, up comes all those details. And so while the image itself isn't the necessary thing that I'm showing you today. The effect that you can get from tissue paper is what I'm trying to example. Okay, and which works well for me because I couldn't find where I put the tissue paper in my studio today. So, oh yeah, but I've already done one. So I'll show you that example that I have printed already. Okay, and so now, mind you, this image has lots of color and stuff, but I'm showing you things in black and white today so that you can see, again, along the same path, the same lines of what we're talking about here. So another example is here with different tapes and pieces of paper in the surface. And this is something I tried to show some of yesterday. But you can see how the large yields of paper, these random shapes which are cut out and taped down. Oh, my heavens, excuse me. I've been trying to fight that off for a few minutes. Okay, so I've adhered them down to the surface. And again, using something like a matte medium, okay, or something of the like. And a matte medium is something that's used for acrylic paint, if you're unaware. All right, local art store it's a gel medium. Okay, it just comes in. It kind of, the camera isn't working. Okay, it kind of looks like paste that you made when you were a kid. You know, let's make some paste in class, and then some kids eating it, and all the excitement. It sort of looks like that. It has that kind of a consistency to it. And but what it is you put some on your paintbrush and you lay it over the surface, put down the tissue paper, put down the other color or value or piece of paper over top of the one that you're working on, and then gently layer over that. Now I'm going to show you that today. So, but this is an example of what that can do for you. And so as soon as you start putting down complex information over top with different medium, you can do all kinds of work that adds all kinds of layer and depth into the image. Okay, and so another example is this is just your traditional black field with ballpoint pen circling it, but what I'm trying to example here is there's a mix of two separate things at play. One is you've got the crosshatch work that is in, and I'll bring it a little closer, the crosshatch work which is around the outside circles, okay? And then the sharp, flat black ink that is the central circle with all this little fiddly bits of repeated globes being drawn in the cycles of the moon, which is a little backwards, I realize, but of Earth. But the way that I'm going about it is to use ballpoint pen again in there, and it sort of unifies the image overall by using two different mark making material in the same image. And then I've got white dots laid out over here and little white arrows that are pointing us around the circle, pushing the eye about. La luna, the moon, right? So, and I think at the bottom I wrote pushy baby. I don't know what comes out of my head sometimes, so forgive me. But my point here that I'm trying to example is you could use different medium in order to express different aspects of the same image. And there's something to show you right here. I made a mistake. Oh, boo-boo time. And I covered that up with white. Now, initially, I should have gone it over again, or now that I'm more adept at Photoshop, I could just remove that out and clean that up with erasing and just my layering. But at the time, good old school white paint, folks. Anyways, so yeah, I'll pull back out of this guy. Next one. I'm going to come back to this because that's just pure chaos. This is a gray piece of paper that I'm using. It's almost like a manila. I've gone over it with two things: watercolor washes, three things. I'm so sorry. Watercolor washes, a black pencil crayon, and white paint. Like just nice, somewhat diluted, but just punches of white paint. And utilizing all those different materials together lets me have different ways of showing different levels of depth as I'm just trying to draw some trees. It's there's a sort of, this is what I'm talking about, where there's a sort of incredulity when we look at somebody else's work and try to say, hey, I like picture, but how make picture go good? And so one of the ways that, I'm trying to help out and assist here is by walking you through the idea that this is a 5-minute sketch for a forest. And it's simply by using positive and negative mark making and not being hung up, not being, forcing myself bound up inside. I got to make the bark perfect in all the trees. I got to do this attention to details that sort of says, oh, well, this is how things actually work. And no, that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is just trying to fling down some shapes and come to some sort of comprehensive understanding of the density of a forest area. So, and how can we do that with different mark making tools in a really fast and haphazard way and try to pull something nice out of it? And that's by not limiting my toolbox. Allow yourself to have a bunch of different things in your carrying case. And if you don't have a little case of some kind, I have this. This is a little easel that my really good friend, adopted brother here, has got me. He actually just gave me this for Christmas, and he thought he was ordering me a cool little pop-up easel for me to carry around, maybe like a briefcase size. I think he was disappointed by how small it actually was when it came. But it has a little ledge, and you can lift it up. But what it actually is a great little container of all kinds of just mark-making material, like just kind of mark-making media in here, so that I can just put this thing in my hand. Well, I got big hands, but I could just grab this thing on the go and have all kinds of stuff to work with. And then I have a space in my studio. I find myself using this sucker all the time. I'll sit it on my lap like this with a little sketchbook and just go. And I'm pulling tricks out from underneath it. But I could just sit this on the shelf right here in my working area in my studio, and it just joins in with all the other mark making stuff. So I don't even have to constantly figure out where something is. But I highly recommend that you have some sort of little container that you can carry a whole bunch of crap in. So that if you find yours in a sketchbook, so if you find yourself so inspired that you want to try to get some sort of piece of something, do it. Okay, so this is another page from the alphabet book. These are, there's formatting on these pages because these are just the print pages. So you'll see that there's different scaling around the sides and stuff like that and that's because they were locked in at uniform page sizes, even though all the different pages that I used for it were all different sizes. So this page up at the top, Climb, is similar to what we did before on the previous page with the woods. But this has got two pieces of paper. There's a serration right here between these two sheets because it's actually two different pieces of paper. I've put some letter stamps in there. Well, maybe you can't see that. Just give me 1 second. I'll make it a little bit bigger and drop it down. I've put letter stamps in there as part of the image in and of itself. And what I mean by letter stamps is literally little stamps you put on a stamp pad and you put on the picture. And the use of textual image in art is called semiotics. So that's what I like to do a lot of. Because if the visual image isn't 100% cluing in the viewer to what's actually going on, sometimes it helps. Climb. That's the letter C in the alphabet book, by the way. Now, this is F for fence. What I've done with this one, the fence. So with a lot of these little pages, is these little images, these little illustrations, and these are 3 by 4 inches, the size of these things. That's a piece of corrugated paper. And if you don't know what corrugated paper is, it's cardboard, right? But when you take cardboard and you peel it apart, and when I say peel it apart, cardboard is made of this ribbed piece in the center and has 2 flat pieces glued on the outside. So ribbed piece in the middle, all right? And then flat piece, there we go, cardboard. That's how it's made, and that's why it gives it strength, but with limiting resources, right? You don't have to use this heavy density of paper because you've got this corrugated bit that connects the top and lower layers. But when you pull those apart, I took the ribbed piece that's in between and I cut a little piece out and I glued it down on this piece of paper that I'm painting, the trees or whatnot in the background behind, and it simulates a fence. So when you touch this little picture, this little drawing, and you run your hands over it like this, you feel the ridges of it. And so then I stamp letters on top. F-E-N-C-E. Funk. What's that? Fence. Fence. So sometimes it's a lot of fun in making these things for the actualized experience of those. Now I can actually drag out the portfolios that I have that has some of these originals left in it, but I don't know if I actually own all these still or if they're sold out or not, but I thought it's just faster to do it this way, so bear with me. I'm also making sure everything's in black and white. This is ballpoint pen. It's a flat ballpoint pen, one simple black ballpoint pen that I have drawn over pieces of tape and torn pieces of paper. The torn pieces of paper up here at the top, the random pieces of tape stuck in here. I'm leaving spaces for the white areas. I'm doing different cross-hatching and layering techniques for drawing it. The shapes, I allow the idea of the shapes to just fall down to an abstract level because it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a pure image in my mind that I'm trying to draw here. Is it a rooftop? Is it a whatever? Well, yeah, all the above. Because the idea is that this guy is an architect. And he says, there's something I brought you up here to show to you. It'll come to me in a minute. There's nothing deeper to this image than that, folks. It's literally, that's it. That's just me playing with the notion of just exploring ballpoint pen on a modulated surface. Now, there's fun things that happen when we're working with pen. There's a clean white little line that flows along the side of this raised surface from the alternate paper that we've glued down. And that's because when you do your crosshatch right up into this other surface, oftentimes, or over top of said surface, oftentimes there's going to be a tiny little ridge in that crevice, that little crack down in that 90-degree joint. Now, when we look at it, we don't, necessarily recognize that this piece of paper on top of this piece of paper is going to create a 90-degree joint inside there because it's so small, but it's there. And sometimes the allowance of the continuation of that, not trying to go back in and fill it in with ink, makes for something more interesting to be in the image. So, I'm sorry, this is black pen and white pen. I apologize because I think it's initially a blue tape, but again, we're looking at things as black and whites today. This is your standard traditional black image drawn flatly on a white piece of paper. And yet, despite just drawing in the flat black, here we go, you can get really fun, deep values in an image. And it's entirely by just considering as you're going about drawing where you scrumble up the lines and the color and the value. Like between these bricks here, I've thrown some small little lines across so that it's not just clean and white, so that the areas that are clean and white pop out more. And it allows a sense of depth by pushing a muted value back and a lighter value forward in our eye. And of course, the deepest value, which is a pure black, gets pushed even farther back still. But what it allows us is to separate these planes. And yet, despite me saying white comes forward, gray's in the middle, and black goes back, it isn't, because when you look at the environment inside of the apartment, by allowing that to not have all kinds of complicated intermediate values and just primarily keeping it to this brightly lit, high contrast white black, it shows you that it's a different environment than the fire escape that's in front of it, ideally. So these are the sort of things that I try to explore as I'm working in that way. The problem with only for the people that just do pinups, I just want to draw pinups of superheroes, or I'm just going to do flat portraits with no environment around a person. Environment and context is massive, and I can't encourage that enough. Look at the environmental space around the person that you're portraying and how that can be utilized to convey more information about the person you're portraying. This is an image from one of my absolutely favorite films, Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock, and the menace and dread of the actor who eventually goes on to become, now I forgot his name. For heaven's sakes. Anyways, this is him. This young actor had a huge second, Perry Mason, had a huge second career when he was in his later years. And but he'll always be remembered for me as a mysterious character across the way from our voyeuristic protagonist, which is Jimmy Stewart. And so I've put Rear Window in the same font. Am I trying to replicate the same font that was on the movie poster for Rear Window and on the telefilm itself? So again, this is just exploring some of these little scribbles and values that we can put in while we're drawing. And this is looks like largely drawn in ballpoint pen with the blacks filled in, whether that's by brushed ink or who knows, could be Sharpie. I don't know. I'd have to drag up the original. So just flicking back through these different examples that I've been showing you for some of these different things. Now, this is in reference to a thesis written by a fantastic painter from London, Ontario, named Jack Chambers. He's the first Canadian artist to sell a piece for at least $25,000. No Canadian artist before him sold a work while alive for that much money. And this was in 70s. Anyhow, notes on perceptual realism, or perception as part and process of memory. And so I recommend you look up Jack Chambers, specifically a painting called Olga and Mary Visiting. It's about his wife and her sister, I think, that are having a cup of tea, but it's got an extra hand with an extra teacup here, as opposed to the hand and teacup that are attached to Mary that is painted 1 foot to the left, where she's the teacup is pursed to her lips because she's sipping the tea, but there's also a floating hand with holding the teacup in front of Mary as well. And then there's a couple of different action aspects on Olga as well. And the idea behind that is that when you remember an event, the problem with two-dimensional images is that we only tactilely remember this one part of said event. And what that does not facilitate for us until we take a further step into animation, or and comics tries to allude to this, and storyboarding tries to allude to this, but we either go from two-dimensional until animated. And that is to say that the different motions, the different transitory moments that allows a movement of somebody having a ball, throwing a ball leaves their hand and disappears off panel. But when we remember something, we don't just remember Olga and Mary sitting across from each other, holding the teacups like this the entire time they're talking, or holding the teacups pursed through their mouths as though they just looked at each other for 2 hours and perpetually sipping the tea. That's not how memory works. That's not how the moment works. You remember the two girls. One image has one of the two ladies going like this, leaning back and ha ha ha, because the active actualization of the conversation, the two of them engaged together, is laughing, sipping tea, talking with their hands. It's all of these different facets of the moment. And so in that, I'm trying to exhibit here a lady walking through a park. And so it's an awful protracted example to get you to the notion of the page in and of itself. But ideally, when you write something like notes on perceptual realism, maybe somebody will look up perceptual realism to see what this refers to. Sometimes you hope too much out of your audience or your readers, and other times maybe we don't hope enough. So in this page, in this drawing, we have graphite pencil, graphite ink stamping, like smudging of ink, like with you put it on your tip of your thumb, which is something I didn't do yesterday, but I might do some of today. And at the same time, there's little squidges of ink and different pieces of mark making. Now, the narrative panels, the repetitive panels along the side, pardon me, is an allusion I'm making towards Chambers and how he would work, and he would have principal images and static images on the side for a period of his time as an artist. Over here, I've got pencil crayon, graphite. Below it, this here, and this here at the top. What these are is that if you take a photocopy, a fresh photocopy, print something or a printout, okay? And then you flip that thing over and face it down onto a piece of paper. And if you take rubbing alcohol is something that you can use, rubbing alcohol, and you put a little bit on a cloth or some gauze or something like that, and you rub it over the back of that paper, it will transfer the photocopy or the printout onto the other surface. Have some ventilation. You're using solvents. Have some ventilation in the room. Have the window open. But what I'm trying to say to you by this is that it allows you to have some little realistically photographed images bumped into your drawings. And so that's what this top panel is. And that's what this little piece of that panel is down below. Is from taking this little image and pushing it down onto the paper. I think that one of them is actually, I think this one is actually the thing, and this is me trying to reverse it and draw it with a pencil crayon so that I can flip the image. Because I couldn't flip the image off the photocopy because it'd be the same side. The tree would be on the same side of the panel. Okay, so this is other mechanisms that you can use for modifying the surface of your paper. If that helps, and if there's any questions, feel free to go back through, and if you need to be reminded that I do this with rubbing alcohol and photocopies or printouts, that, we do this by just being loose and free and throwing down a whole bunch of marks and then tightening it up together with paint after the fact. This is a piece of cardboard paper. This is utilizing tape inside of a drawing that we're just keeping down to two, a white pen and a black pen, two tools. This is your traditional pen drawing that you've now filled in your blacks to give a dramatic effect. Yeah, this has got graphite, it's got pencil crayon, it's got the transferred image, it's got stamped letters. It's, again, I'm talking about just use anything that you can think of. Tissue paper. Okay, so that's the example portion from previously existing things. Okay, so now, with that in mind, I knocked over my camera. All right, with that in mind, so one of the things that we can do now is look at how can we go about taking different bits of bobs that we have around in our space. And this is a handy trick to do when you've got limited amount of materials. All right, so this is just a standard piece of white cardstock paper like we have been using for the other two example pages that I've shown you. All right, so there's your standard white page. And I'm all aces today. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. All right. My face doesn't matter. Anyways, let's look at this. So I've got my standard white page. One of the things that I had just mentioned was, and I'm going to use, okay, so we're going to stick to this eye motif whenever I can, okay, of the drawn eye, this image right here. So I'll throw it under there. Who cares? So I've got this brush here. I'm going to do a couple things. One, I'm just going to put I'm just putting some water on this piece of the page. And then I'm going to throw some water down. I'm going to just start a couple things for us here. This is just a flat field application of some gray. And then third thing is I'm going to take my thumb, all right, and I've got some material on it. And so one of the things that we can do for monkeying with our surface is just looking at how can we start to lay in the same image if we've got nothing to draw with, but we've got some material to work from, or some medium to work from, is that we can look at different ways in which we can apply that material into our image. And based on the pressure that you're putting down with your finger or whatever it is, whatever part of your anatomy woo-woo, that we're using. And that allows us to keep a rag nearby. It helps to clean up your business or a piece of clothing you're not necessarily concerned about and that your wife won't yell at you for getting paint on. All right, and so this is me going through and just bringing up some of these little lines and these little marks with, depending on the amount of pressure I'm putting down with my thumb, and going over the same areas again. Now, that's sort of like a basis. That's not the finished drawing of the eye. You know, this is just the basis of it. But what it does give us is a place to start from. Sorry, my phone was flashing. I just want to make sure that's not because I have to keep track of my blood sugar, so that's all. All right, so this is watercolor on thumb, you know, and then we'll see what we add to that afterwards. So we've got our color field wash and we've got our wet surface here. Now I just wet it and I left it. I didn't add anything over top of the wet yet, because just wetting it and leaving it like this, letting it dry for a moment, it's going to do two things. It's going to burst the surface of your paper a little bit. So the paper, you'll notice with a piece of paper, when it's formed and it's a nice brand new sheet of paper, it's nice and flat and there's no permutations or ridging or anything like that happens. But when you put some water down on it, it's never going to be the same again. So there's a couple of little ridges and silly bits of business that are going on in here. So now when I draw over that, it's going to have this landscape of flowing shape. So that lets me push the environment. That lets me push and pull the surface in and of itself. And with the allowance of that, it lets me change things up a little bit, right? Now, I don't have rubbing alcohol here because I just didn't plan on putting solvents to work in my studio today. But the example that I showed you earlier in the page of Notes on Perceptual Realism, please consider that approach and how you can utilize that for incorporating it into your work. This is letraset, okay, that I'm going to put some of this in. I've got a couple different things I want to show you. This is a sheet of watercolor paper, okay? You can buy this in a little block. 10 sheets for $6. All right, and so I've pulled one of the sheets out of this little book. It's literally that size, right? And I'm just going to cut off this piece. And I'm going to cut some smaller snippets of it so we can use it in a couple different ways. Now, one of the things that I can do with this is that I can bind it in a couple different ways. I can use an acrylic or something like that. I can use a matte medium. You could use traditional glue to bind it down to your surface. But whatever way you're going to do it, recognize that however you apply it, make sure that if it's got ridges, it's because you intended it to. If it's got a nice flat and smooth consistency, it's because you intended it to. I'm going to take off my suit jacket so I don't get it all dirty. I'm going to take off the suit jacket. Anyways, so I'm dipping the brush in this clear container of water I have nearby, and I'm loading up some of this matte medium onto the end of a paintbrush, and I'm going to paint it along the back side of the thing I want to stick down, right? So I'm globbing that business onto here and getting it spread about, fair amount. Just want to make sure I got every little bit covered. And so as I stick it down, and then I'm going to press down forcibly. Now you can do this a couple of ways. Use the bottom of the brush to push it down. But I also like to do this with the brush itself. It's just give a coat over top. Okay, so that's one way of working it. Now another thing, because we've got it out, that we can use matte medium for. Matte is flat. Think of it that way. And gel is globby. When you look at the two mediums on the shelf for acrylic materials. Now I'm going to put some matte medium on the paper in this chunky and sloppy way. You can't really see it because it's ostensibly white or clear white on a white piece of paper, but it's there, and it's ugly. So we're gonna let this dry for a moment, okay? And I'm going to do another little section of that because I'm going to show you two different things that we can do with the same basis. But I'm going to put this one half on and half off this area up above that has some of this watercolor wash here. Okay. All right. So that's two different things that we can do to start our monked up surface. Now I showed you some of that tape stuff yesterday. I can do more of that on here if you like. That's fine. But that's that sucker. Now, another thing that I was going to do is that I'm going to take a black acrylic and I'm going to find my paint tray. And so what I'm going to do with this little bit of black acrylic is that I'm going to take this same brush that I used before, and I'm going to load it up this time with a black acrylic paint. And with this other piece that I cut off that larger body, I'm just throwing a bunch of this acrylic onto the bottom of it. And one of the things that I do with large drawings is that I do this to the drawings. I don't know, or large paintings or whatnot. I do this all the time to them, where I'll take other pieces of paper or other pieces of canvas and I will adhere them to the surface, like so. And the reason that, and I'll, that base paint that I'm using for the image, I'm going to put them down into the image this way. And so because I've got this here now, it's going to appear on camera as a flat surface. But what it is this large square bonded down to the existing surface that we're working with. Now, I'm going to take some of this black acrylic, and in this area that I painted earlier, I'm going to put some of this black acrylic down, and hopefully, as this water has dried on this page, you're going to see when I run it over that it's going to pool in certain ways now. So this is another modulative effect that works in order to tell us, there's complicated information under the surface, so that when we put our flat static image over top of it, if there's more compulsion to our eye to look around the surface, because we can see there's more little bits and bobs. So you can see how the water, excuse me with the sneezing again, I apologize. You can see with the water, and I'll roll my sleeves up too. Oh, he's getting to work if he's rolling his sleeves up. He means the business. I like this shirt because it has this cool pattern underneath that when you roll your sleeves up, oh yeah, it's business now. Anyways, you can see it pooling here in these little dips and bits in the surface of the paper that we've changed the tension on by previously wetting it down and leaving it with a number of or an amount of water in that specific area. Now, I'm going to show you something else that's fun in the sun. There are two ways that we can go about this, and I'm going to show both of them. Just give me a second. I'm grabbing a ballpoint out of my tickle box. Yeah, that's what I'm going to start calling it, a tickle box. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. All right, so this is a standard ballpoint pen you find at a dollar store. Now, if I do a quick drawing, a quick little snippety snappity boo of the eye that I keep doing over and over again for our exampling, and just come in here with this ballpoint and throw this down so that it's already there. The reason that I'm doing this first is that, and I'm going to do it again, just show you something fun, but the reason that I'm doing this first is that there's a difference in it being under and over what I'm about to do. And that is to lay down some of this letter set, zipatone type business. Zipatone is actually a material chemical that you put down the page in it. Anyways, letter set is the thing that I grew up with, that you can find those textures in your Photoshop programs now. So if you can find any of these things that can be emulated with Photoshop, you explore those. Like I know for a fact that you can do zipatone look, like the little day glow dots all over your image in Photoshop, and it gives some value to the drawings. Okay, so there's the eye underneath. Now I've got, and I'll do this a couple times. So here is a piece of well, it's actually 2 pieces deep, and I'm going to cut off this chunk of leftover zipatone. This is when you know that you're working as an old person, because you've still got this kicking around someplace. So this is me laying this over top of the image, and so you can see how that cool texture is put down there now, and our drawing is underneath it. Okay, but then I'm also going to draw on top of it as well and do the same thing. And so when you do it on top, though, I find personally that your blacks stay black. They're not muted at all by the zipatone, because I think that if you look at how it is here compared to how it is here already, you could see the difference. And so if you're able to get your hands on some of this jazz, do so and play with it, because it's so much fun. And then as I'm working off the zipatone, so like the zipatone is half incorporated into the drawing, even that gives us something, because of the fact that it's not throughout the entirety of the space. So this is, again, something to play with and to explore, and not just take it for granted that it works in this way and this way only, and that you can do different things with it. And then, of course, in both cases where I didn't have to add it down before because it was a white piece of paper, when I'm working with the zipatone, what's really fun with it, and this is just ballpoint again, folks, this is just a white ink gel pen, but I can go right over top of the zipatone and pick and choose now where that texture comes through. And so again, this is giving us an underlying texture to our paper, to our image, but at the same time, we're allowing ourselves to explore that further, to chase down more little marks and things that we can add into our drawing that we might not have considered. And so when it comes to traditional drawing and when it comes to traditional mark making for our storytelling, there's just so many things that we can try and so many things that we can learn that allows us so much. So I better start getting back to making my notes here. This is ballpoint pen, pen under. I'm just going to call it letter set because it's not actually Cipitone. Letter set's the kind of material that I use. And this is ballpoint pen over Cipitone. And so you can see just in the image itself there that this is more grayed out. Okay, now again, I can go over and I'll do it a little bit with the white, not too much. I don't want to, the dramatic example is really important, right? So if I've got a little bit of the white in here, and you can see, despite the fact that I've got the muted image, just by putting a little bit of that white over top, it allows us to have that more subdued image now, that more subdued drawing, because it's not the crisp and hard black that it is beside itself. So there's, again, there's benefits of playing with both aspects of this. And then I'll write a little note here with white over, and then with white as well. Now that's just ballpoint, okay? You can also go over the same thing with your standard marker setup and try to pull out, your eye here, but you're going to get a standard effect with your marker work, no matter what. But there's your marker over Cipitone. Now, there's different approaches to that, that we can utilize. Like there's let's try this. This is some lined Cipitone here that I've got. And so I'll do a quick drawing with this gel pen of the eye. And just drawing the same eye over and over again, not even overly worried about whether it consistently looks exactly like the same eye, but just throwing an eye shape down each time from the same side. It just sort of pushes us to our association in some sense that all the eyes, their eyes, that uniformity allows you to just understand different examples of the same thing. It doesn't have to be perfectly the same, because it ain't gonna be. No siree, Bob. Ain't got that talent. Ain't got that level of skill. What do you think, a robot? Don't trust the robots. All right, so here we go with some more. There's another eye we've got put down here. A hard line. Anyways, so what I'm coming towards on this one is that when we put directional lines, all right, and this is what I'm going to use here, is a directional line Cipitone that I have. What is this? Is that on top or is that underneath? It doesn't matter. It's fine. Just leave it in. So if I put this, I'm going to do it half on the eye. If I do this directional line underneath, you can see how a directional line in an image changes the way your eye works and your eye moves on said image. So directional line, zip, I'm just calling it zip over ballpoint or gel pen. It's a gel pen with white pen. Okay, so if I put down these directional lines, your eye moves in a certain way because of the directional line. It'll take your eye up and down. It'll take your eye throughout the image in whatever way that you place those lines. So if the lines are moving up and down, you're going to find that you're going to move the reader's attention up and down. So I'll make a note of that, is that direction of line moves the eye. I like that I can write over top of this. It's fun. Anyhow, so when you're doing that, again, that's another one of those things. Oh, there's Philip who said something. I should say hi. I was watching earlier, but I had to run out for a bit. I'm back and listening in. Well, you're always very welcome, sir. And anybody that isn't able to catch us at the time but catches it afterwards, you're always welcome as well. Thank you very much for tuning in, folks. Okay, so this is another example of that where we've put down some zipatone, but being this line zipatone with these little dots over top, because this is all refuse zipatone that I'm using. It sort of allows us to put in some details that we might not have. It's belaborious sometimes to draw all these dots. So if you can go in your computer program and find some of these overlay screens, and if you can't find a black and white one, scan it, and then take the white out of the scan and convert it to a ping, so that you can then use that as a zipatone on anything else that you're doing. I'm not going to get into all the steps of how to go through those processes. Maybe I'll show you visually sometime in a video, but if you can convert your image into a ping, you can make your own zipatones. If you've got some texture that you've been flicking around on paper and you really enjoy that texture, scan it and then see if you can make a file into your Photoshop program that's just that texture. And the best way to be able to see these things as we've got them saved on our programs is, of course, is to make a JPEG where the pings actually show up, so that when you look at what files you've got in this envelope, the pings will actually show up like JPEGs do. So, okay, so you can see there's dot zipatone and how the dot zipatone. And ideally, when I scan this and post it up tomorrow, you'll be able to see clearly these little dots far better than you can see when it's underneath the camera, unless I bring it up really close and it gives it a moment to focus. And even that's not going to do well because, I'm lucky. But, okay, so this is yet another example. So there's watercolor put on by thumb, right? So there's applied watercolor on thumb with ink highlight. So if I go back in now over this little eye drawing that I did with the tip of my thumb, if I go in and find certain lines out of it and just drop those in their own little ways, in this case very lightly, just use them all as enhancements. Again, it's just another way of putting marks down that we might not, we think we got to do the finished drawing. We think we got to do the full and complete piece, but we don't. You can just have the little highlights, the little enhancements to something. We can recognize as human beings, we can recognize eyes, we can recognize how some of these things come together. This is still drying, by the way. The matte medium that I put down, rather gloppy, and the acrylic is still drying here as well. So we just need to give this stuff a moment to let these washed in areas just to dry a little bit more. So in the meantime, we're going to keep going on this way, further and further down this page. So please bear with me. All right, so there's all kinds of zipatone that you can get, all kinds of letter set. I'll use one of these in a second. Okay, that you can find and utilize in your imagery. Then we get into stuff like this, and this is where I think you start to have some real fun with it. Give me 1 second to peel this off. And so it comes on a flat sheet. It's old school stuff. You got to find some place that still has some. But I'm going to lay this down here. This is one of these really cool textured, gray textured zipatones. And we can do two things with this. Eraser. Yeah, this one's got an eraser. Okay, so I'm going to erase out the, oh, that's not the best eraser. Let me try. You got to apply a little bit of pressure here. So I'm going into the zipatone as I've laid it down, and I'm erasing over it with just a regular old pencil eraser. And I'm pulling out the same shape of the eye. So I'm not actually putting anything down. I've other than the simple surface in and of itself, and I'm just trying to scrape it off, or erase it off in this case. Now, so this is the same little shape system that we're using, the eye shape, and this is being erased out. Okay. Stay. It's not gonna stay. Anyways, sorry. You got things sliding off my disk area. Okay, so this is zipatone. Maybe I better write that in white. Erased. Now, yeah, I'll go over that again in white. The other thing I can do is grab a hold of an X-Acto knife, and I can do, sometimes this works with the old zipatone and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going in now, okay, and I'm erasing, trying to erase out or scratch out. Yeah, it's not letting me. That's unfortunate. Okay. Sometimes with old zipatone it gets difficult to do it. So let me see if this guy will work. Yeah, okay, so this is this junky Faber-Castell pen, brush tip marker that I was telling you about before. This is pretty much the only time that this thing has something to it, is that it actually works pretty consistently on top of zipatone. They really aren't the best because they tend to absorb into things, and because zipatone is a plastic and it doesn't have a huge absorption rate compared to other surfaces, it tends to bead and sit on top and allow me to do whatever I'm trying to do with it. So, you know, it has that little brushed aesthetic to it. So I kind of like that. But there we go, putting in that eye again. Right? So that's, what is that? Brush tip marker. Over zipatone. I'm trying to write all these down so that people can look at this after and realize how some of these things are put together. Now, so I'm going to write down here, scraping zipatone away works too, but you know, it's got to be new zip, and it today it didn't for me, but I'm just going to make sure I put that note down. So if you get some fresh stuff and put it down, it might yield you some fun results. And then this is your white gel pen, just going down over top, that you're able to just draw right on top of this heavily textured stuff and get in all kinds of fun lines and information of drawing the same ding dong thing over and over and over and over again. Chris, why did you draw that picture so many times? I don't know. to make the voices stop. Anyways. So there's, and that's white gel pen over sip. So that works too. So all these little, even one modulation of the surface of putting down a piece of textured zipatone like that. And I wish I could get that texture to show through as I bring it close to the camera. But unfortunately, it doesn't do that. It just flat grays on us. But it's got this wonderful little Dayglow dot business going on here. And when I scan it, you'll see it. Now, this is, a couple little further examples of that same thing. This is here's a Dayglow dot. Just give me a sec here. Got to peel this bad boy off, and they don't peel easy sometimes, especially when you got mitts like mine. The voices stopped after I quit the call center job. That's good to hear. So this is the clear Dayglow dot example that we showed earlier. I'm just going to put that down up with that eye that I drew earlier, just so you can see it a little more clearly by putting it up there a little wider. Okay. So this is a gray tone that we're using now. And it's just a flat field of gray. Really nothing more to it than that, where you put it down and it just allows you. Now, what it actually is really fine little dots. But so I'll put a little extraneous piece up there just so you can see how you can have it cut and made to fit. Now, the nice thing about this is by having that intermediate value just pre-established there, by having that just sitting there on your surface, for what a lot of people, what it does is it allows them not to have to monkey about. And this works the same way in your computer programs with your as a graphic device. Is if you use a lasso tool and you just start and hold shift down each time that you just fill in a little area like this throughout your drawing, as you bucket fill one of them, it'll bucket fill all of them with the same chosen gray tone or intermediate tone. So that's kind of nice. So I'm going to write down here that's just simply applied gray tone shapes to change surface. And so another example that I can show you of that is that if I go over the same spot again, okay, if I'm putting in this image and it goes half on and half off this surface, so that you've got this kind of half and half application to it, even that allows you to do some things, to see some things in your drawing that you might not have seen otherwise, because your drawing was, tightly, uniformly looked at as this is the surface color of the paper, or I'm going to change the surface color paper to entirely this. But if you do your drawing on the surface, regardless of what the value is underneath, it's going to allow you to, make different emotional connections to the page, because you've got this half gray, half white, whatever the colors are underneath. They're not all quite uniform. They're not all quite the same. You're going over different shapes. You're changing the way that you're looking at whatever the elements are in your drawing, because of the fact that it's not just a nice uniform flat thing. And there's benefit to that, because how the viewer should look at that and go, how did he go about doing that? Or why did he make those choices? Anything that you do that subjectively changes your image, right, should make your viewers, your readers of your story, or just if it's a flat graphic image, you want to have people look at it. And some of the things that you would ideally like to do is to instill questions in them. It's to spark dialogue in your reader and your viewer, to ask the wherefores and whys, or if you can draw their attention to an image a little bit longer because you've done something, unexpected, or you've done something in an unconventional way, if you can get them to sit down and take a moment more with the image and ask some more questions about the context of the moment. So if it's in a story, let's say, and you switch your graphic storytelling device, you've got a largely black and white routine page, but then this panel switches to the character, looking off with a really incredibly strong contrasty highlight on one side of the face and a shadow on the other, but you've decided to draw that in pencil and not to ink it at all. That emotional moment is going to resonate more clearly, or it's going to have more affectatious resonation for your reader because of the step change, right? So it's like you're listening to music and a bridge kicks in, takes the song a different way for a second, and then it kicks back into the principal melody. That's a purposeful action. And that purposeful action is to keep you hopping with it. So this is simply applied gray tone shapes to change the surface. And then we've just put laid an image over top of it. Over top with pencil and white ink. I'm using an awful lot of the white ink, largely to show you, because it's a really fine example of showing you the separation between the surface states. But by changing the surface in and of itself for us, it's allowing us to recognize that there's so many different things we can pull out of our tool bag to monkey around with any old simple drawing that we're doing just by modulating the surface, messing with the surface itself. I should get paid product placement. All right, so so I mean that really helps us out there. And of course, there's the consistency of just drawing on the surface of it itself, and just not being too concerned about the fact that it's just anything additional beyond the fact that it's just a gray surface that we're working on. Right? So that just, and the reason that I'm showing casing that and not going outside of the extent of it is because I want to separate the two distinctly differently from one another. All right, so this is just and what I'm going to do here is to show that so this is flat image drawn in frame of reference and then I'm going to put color field. And so what I mean by that is that here's the frame of reference, right? And then this is the raw paper underneath. And what I mean by raw paper is that this is this is adhered to the paper. And if you say, let's put a rectangle of this down, or put a gray square down centered inside your image, and you have an inch on the outside of the whole thing, and then you draw your image on that center area, well, you've already made a step change of the white border around it, which focuses your viewer on the surface from the image itself, not the white border around it. Their focus is drawn inside to the interior plane, or the frame that is inside that gray value. And I'll just throw a little bit of white accenting in the here. Nothing too intense. Just, by putting white accents, it enhances the image itself because you can see that there's this separation of lines. And unfortunately, it doesn't look to me like it's showing up very clearly. But again, this is one of the things that I think when I scan it, it's going to resonate a little more. And you're going to see how you might not see the dots, the micro dots to make that up, but you'll definitely see more of that dot pattern that's in this darker tone. Okay, so yay! All right, where was that brush? Okay, so the other thing I was going to do was just so I've got this black on the canvas that's attached to it. Now I'm just going to put some black on a brush, a chisel tip brush. Okay, that means flathead. All right, and then I'm just going to paint the eye in here like this in a really sloppy, chunky kind of way. Whoops. All right, so I'm placing this in here again and looking at how I can lay paint on the top of this sucker as well. And conversely, ink is the same. It's no different. All right, but you can do all kinds of paint in this regard. Let me switch out my brush. All right, and then I'm going to go, is this going to pick up at all? Just give me a second. So pulling up, there we go. We're getting some white. Okay, so I've got some white here. So this is acrylic paint. Oops, I'm sorry. This is acrylic paint down here. And so you can see how it maintains the consistency of the marks that we're putting down with the brush. Whereas with watercolor, not at all. As you can see how, because of that way the surface works, the watercolor works vastly different. Almost disagreeably so. It's just something I just wanted to show you so that by putting this paint down in this way, you're actually kind of more abstracting it. Now, if you go over that again, because you've pushed that surface just the tiniest of bits, it's going to force it. It's going to force the surface to allow you to paint on a little bit more because you've put a surface of the paint down on it already. So this is watercolor on Zipatone, and that's how watercolor works with Zipatone. It doesn't. All right, so I'll write that in white right over top of it. Over zip and acrylic over zip. All right, so you can see the difference between the two. It's vast. It's a vast difference. But at the same time, there is all kinds of fun things that happen as it dries in that pooling that you're going to see. I'm going to make a note that says all kinds of fun things as it dries. And over time, we're going to see that more and more, so that there'll be those little raised globs and these sort of half textured, half dotted surfaces, and you'll see this much more clearly, of course, in the scan. So again, we're putting more and more of these details down. Now, when you just give me a second here, I'm going to go back into some gel medium pretty quick. This is like a wax paper. okay, that we're going to attach some down here in a sec. This is what they put the Zipatone on, as a type of wax paper. And this is a cardstock. And I'm going to show you little differences between A, B, and C. And this is a standard old typewriter paper that we're going to use here too. All the fun in the sun, huh? Look at this. I didn't know there was so many kinds of paper, Chris. And we've already done the watercolor paper down here, and we'll see how that affects things in a second. All right. Now, there's two different methods. What is this? After the water of the watercolor evaporates, though, as it, yep. Okay, I thought, well, maybe it'll still come up, Phil. I thought there was something more to that. Or you were responding to something. Okay, so we've got different types of paper that we're going to apply down here too. And as well, or also ran. What did I just do with the scissors? Blonde moment. Yeah, well, I misplaced those. So, okay, so I'm serrating the paper by hand. Fancy word for tearing, because these textures that are in the fact that you're tearing that come up are really fun. I like those a lot. All right, get this out of the road. And then I'm going to use some of this guy too. It's a cardstock that's got a torn or ripped edge, textured edge to it. Okay, let's say the surface that the watercolor is on is Zipatone. Sorry, Philip. The surface that the watercolor is on is a Zipatone. And because Zipatone is largely a plastic surface, it's going to have different adherence for different materials that go down on top of it. So what we're doing is we're playing and exploring how acrylic paint has far more consistency, and yet the watercolor isn't going to bind as well into the surface of the Zipatone because it needs a little more tooth. It needs a little more something to grab a hold of. So unfortunately, it's not going to be there to make us all so happy for the entire evening. I'm going to teach the rest of this as Walter used to neck. Come along, let's move. Sorry, one more second. After it sits for a while, will it absorb into it? Technically, yes, but it's not going to absorb in a flat, clean, consistent little way. If you work over it again, if you do another layer of watercolor on top, then yeah, it will. You'll be able to more regularly maintain the space that you wanted it to. So your second part. So even when the water evaporates, the remaining dry paint probably won't stick. It will. Is it perfectly affixed? Not like it is with other material, but it does. It will permeate enough that it maintains its hold, but you sure can scrape it off. You sure can make marks into it. It's just how it is. Like it's a strange. So this is cardstock. It's a strange thing about Zipatone that it has this wonderful degree of versatility that you can do different things with it, but at the same time, it has some gross limitations to it of things that you really can't do with it. It's just a balance of figuring out which is which. There's some good examples of really capitalizing on the benefits, and there's some good examples of experimenting from it, pushing out of it. so that you can get effects out of it you might not have recognized if you had just looked at it from one uniform static way, like experimenting with it like this and then scraping at it, like taking an X-Acto knife. And I don't know that it's dry yet enough for me to do this, but if I take an X-Acto knife, or let me take this calligraphy, really fine point calligraphy pen, when it's dry enough and I don't think it's there yet, I'm going to scratch at it a little bit and I'll show you how you can do something with that surface texture of it. This is two different ways of putting paper down. This is gel medium underneath, and this is gel medium not only underneath but over top. It's got that additional surface coating over it. And the reason that it's an either or it is that this has something to do with how you're applying your image down in certain ways. One will have benefit over the other. If you're doing a ballpoint pen drawing, having gel medium at different depths, at different levels of coarseness throughout your image is going to disrupt the gel medium, or your gel medium is going to disrupt the surface. And that's where you start getting little digs, like Philip, you were talking the other day about the white ballpoint pens, and how when you draw a line with them, depending on the pressure and the size, the width of the pen, you'll start to see a separation of it actually being two lines and a little ridge in the center of it, or a little causeway in the center of it, because of the way a ballpoint works, that the ball's in the center and the ink goes around, that unfortunately the ball's making a mess of the line. So if you're doing ballpoint pen on top of a surface that's already been coated with a medium, depending on either how thick it is in spots or how fresh you're drawing into it after it's applied, you can mess up that surface. You can mar that surface with your strokes. At the same time, that can be a benefit. If you want to scrape out strange little lines across it like it's raining, that could work too. But so this is medium under paper, and then pen over it. And I'm using pen or pen and pencil because it's a standard thing. It's the most easily accessible thing for most people. If I start getting into fancy brush pens and fancy tools, I think it limits the basic fundamental understanding of how we can go about it. So this is medium under and over paper. And then I'll show you how that actually has benefits for other than pen and pencil. Okay, so I can start working immediately on the glue or matte medium in this case. Can start working. You can start right away and need to wait. See how the ink spreads like that? Like there's a perfect example of how the ink applies itself differently from the same pen to dry and wet. Need to wait. It thickens your pen. I guess we'll put it down as that. When wet. Which just goes without saying, but it's still at the same time it helps to say it. Okay, so if I draw the same eye on here again, boy, oh boy, maybe I just like the look of this eye. All right, I'm disappointed in myself for that joke. You get it's just the uniform image that we're looking at, everything, whether it's all the variations in the different ways, and I'm roughly drawing the same shape. But even drawing the same thing routinely over and over again, I get bored and do different things with it. So this is another thing I'm wanting to show you right here, and that is I'm going to extend the drawing out over the edges of the surface that I put down, because this is again a fun in the sun thing that we can do to make our image a little bit more interesting by having these little surface marks. From the extent of, or from, sorry, the drawing extending out over the limits of the paper. And, you know, I like that stuff. That's the stuff that I actually, one of the reasons that I'll do modulations of the surface is for these extra little bits. And you figure out how to make the pencil work over the sides so that, you know, and I say put the marks flat, do your drawing flat over changes in surface. Boy, good luck to whoever's reading all these notes after the fact, huh? So I'm going to need to wait for this a second still, right? But in the meantime, I can put my little accents in. Just my little doodly-doos on this sucker. So it's, again, even while I'm drawing the same thing over and over again and showing specific ways that it works on one surface or another, I still want to try different combinations and applications of the marks that I'm putting down so that I'm using whatever different pens and so on and so forth. So, you know, you're going to get effects out of that. How are we doing? This is pretty close to being workable at this point. Again, you got to let it dry for X amount of time. Okay, so I'm going to come in here with watercolor on a brush. All right, I'm going to load up a brush here with, and I'm arguably saying that in a lot of regards, the watercolor and ink pretty closely work the same for some things or for most things. So that's why I'm not switching and swapping between the two. All right, so if I just paint this over this, and it's really wet paint over this canvas paper, the watercolor paper, I'm sorry, that I've put down, I want to allow that texture to just find itself popping out of here. Not really reloading the brush, I'm just sort of spacing it out and letting it do its thing so that you can get, and then when you jump between surfaces, this is where you see that sort of fantastic little line jump through there now. So really wet, so that's wet, water, color on, let's say over a fixed H2 color paper. You like that? H2 color? I don't want to write waters. Takes too long. Hours. So, you know, that's sort of, again, it does that nice thing. Now, here's a wonderful thing that I really like doing. I like drawing in pencil on watercolor paper because of that crazy texture that it gives you. And it sort of gives you some really interesting and compelling lines without having to do a lot of work. And as an inherently, lazy human being, I like more results for less work. So you can see there's the change, there's the shift, there's the surface shift of how, trying not to smudge everything I've already done. This is pencil. See, I should have done the H2O paper watercolor. Yeah, so there you get that fun texture that I think will pop up in the scan far more clearly. But maybe you can see it there. Again, not the best cameras. So, okay, so now I've got this fun surface thing going on. I'm going to try a couple of things. So this is gel medium globbed onto the surface. And that's there, and that is also there, okay? So if I'm painting this on with watercolor, because of the different shapes, the watercolor is going to move in and out of these crevices and valleys as it, like it's just a wet little application on the brush. So as I put it down, it's going to dry in weird ways because it's moving through these little ridges and so on and so forth. I've already started mucking that up. So that's one thing. And another thing is when, as I'm drawing over it, this is something that Struzen does. Struzen monkeys up his surface. Drew Struzen, I'm sorry. He puts medium or paint itself in these gesticulative ways and these smushy ways, and then he goes over lightly with pencil crayon. And boy, let me tell you, you get some of the cool effects of highlights and so forth that way. So that when you're going over, you see how you get these different marks. I don't know how well you can tell over there, but it's actually showing these channels, and you can start to pull them out and enhance them a little bit. And it's really just going around this, popping up globs of medium. So if you lightly brush over, you lightly go over with the pencil, and it pulls up the detail. Can draw over, right? So you can work right over top of this sort of mucked up, matte medium globbed up surface. But, you know, you can also do things like going over it very lightly pulls up some of those details and those effects, and that's really kind of nice. It's really kind of compelling, so that when, let me see if I can get this to work. Okay, now I'm just going to try to put a wash across. I'm dropping water on it. Okay, so let's see how that dries and how that globs up. And you'll see what I mean by, see, you can already see right here, there's little circles and shapes, little peaks and valleys that are popping up because we put gel medium down there. And now as we're putting a layer over top of it, it's, of course, the gel medium is going to keep the watercolor from wanting to absorb into the paper because it's interfering with that process. But in those places where there's the valleys, where there's less of the gel medium, of course, that's where all the water and the pigment goes. So as it dries, it gives us these interesting little textures that are underneath our drawing. And then we, of course, can work in various ways over top of it, like I've just shown you with the pencil. So, you know, it's so it's heavy water. Over for peaks and valleys. Yeah, a lot of running into writing. I'm sorry for that. Right, so this is just a gray field. This works the same way as the a gray field of watercolor works the same way as the flat field of the Zipatone. The difference is that you're able to apply. So a flat field of gray or intermediate color, but in this case of a gray, as a color field of whatever shape, you can work more materials over it. And as an example, here's a white pencil crayon. His name is Dave. He loves long walks. Now let's take a look. What am I doing? I meant to show you in the opposite. No black pencil crayon in here anymore. Where have they all gone? I'm looking at my old tickle trunk here. Black pencil. Oh, black pencil. It's a lot of mark making to go through here. Hey, crayon, we'll put some of that in. So you can go over in crayon, you can do all kinds of fun stuff. Same thing, like you can see how those reservoirs are drying now on that paper, which is far nicer. Another thing that you can go over a surface with is, I'll show you here, this is lightly running over an area just with a flat crayon parallel to the, this is the same sort of effect I got out of the tissue image that I was showing earlier. And if you're not sure what that was because you joined late, check back in the video after we're done here, and you'll see the tissue paper effect that I showed on one of the previously done files. So crayon over surface lightly. So that gives this texture, right? So you can draw in crayon. You can, pencil crayon isn't working out too well because I got a cheap pencil crayon in front of me here because I don't know where I've placed my good ones. So here is a wax pencil. So I'm just trying to show that you can draw over top of it. Pencil crayon, crayon. But it just, all these different things give you different effects. You know, and that's the whole point. That's the piece of fun in the sun. All right, now, just do a couple more, and then I think I might call it a day. Just been going for a while already, and I gotta be careful of stuff. So, this is more of a mark making approach, is that loose scribbling of an image. It's a fun effect that you can draw with. That drawing over the paint, the coat, little coated layer there gives you a nice soft effect to it. This is a wet wash over wet paper. And then so when we're drawing over that ballpoint, or I got 83 things in my hands again. So it gives you this fantastic little clunky surface of, it's not a flat, consistent gray, not flat base color. And then still putting away decorations film. Oh my gosh. I am a absolute terror, I think, for my wife, that when I put away our decorations, it's probably better not to watch me. As I am careful, I never broke anything, but the speed I move at is absurd. And there's lots of precious family things that we have and historical things of importance to us in our decorations. And it's probably better just not to watch. So the moment that I break one day, boy, am I in trouble. But yeah, she calls it my Tasmanian devil mode. So this is drawing over pre-wet surface. So with all these different ways that we can work over top of monkeying up our surface, it sort of allows us to find other different effects and things here by the stuff that we're sticking down and the stuff that we're applying and the ways that we're working over top. Oh, Gary's joined us. Hi, Gary. So, yeah, I was going to finish off a couple last things, and then I'll get into this stuff tomorrow, or I'll do it later on today and just post it. So now that we've got this pre-painted canvas, so this is canvas attached. Oh my God, I'm the opposite. I move at a snail's pace. Oh yeah, no, I don't blame you. You should be worried about anything getting broken. It's I'm the one that's the maniac here. That's why my wife calls it my Tasmanian devil mode. By paint. So this is canvas attached to the paper by paint. And so now as I'm drawing it, I'm drawing over it, you can see how it gives us this sort of fun, crazy, monkeyed up surface. So we can start to find and explore different lines in this wonderful kind of a muted version of the same eye. Hand pink waving. And that is, oh, actually it's a grease pencil, but yeah, works. Same damn principle. Anyways, yeah, so then there's that. There is, this is where, even when you're drawing in a pencil crayon, you're going to get this sort of a different approach to it, where your marks aren't going to have the same kind of resonance, because it's that tooth really separates the way that the marks work on the paper. So I think that's kind of fun. I don't know if that tooth is picking up enough there, but there's that canvas texture. Pencil crayon. And then if we go over here again, back into the old watercolor, eh? So this is not much different than if you're actually painting on canvas. So this is really wet. because I want to play with that same. All right, that's my alarm telling me off. Okay, so all right, here we go. Almost there. So here we are with the really wet watercolor getting dropped onto it. You know, H2O color over canvas. Okay. So that's kind of the fun thing about, I'm going to do a really dry watercolor in a second too. That's the kind of the fun thing about all these different ways that we can apply marks together onto these surfaces that have these different applications to them already, which starts to create these sort of different surface tensions. I like exploring that a lot, in the sense that it lets me creatively find different means and avenues to, you tell the same story a different way. And I am hard pressed to restrain myself to keep from going hog wild and doing all kinds of nutty things to push and pull this process. And it's, once you start down this rabbit hole, there's all kinds of things that you can do that you might not be as aware of. And this is trying not to get my hands in anything wet here. This is acrylic. Over canvas. So while I'm here, let's do a marker version on this sucker. So I think I've got a fair amount of examples today of different ways that we can come at this, of different ways that we can apply ourselves to how we're looking at the image itself. Marker over paint. So there's just, this is just a sort of sampling for today of all kinds of different methods in which we can do this, and we can apply ourselves to different modulated surfaces. There's still lots more to do. There's still lots of different ways I can show you some of these things, but take a look at the first half of this video, and because many of those methods that I was going to put on this same page, I've exampled at the start of this video. And I think I might actually do another one of these, but really of just clipping some of the previous existing images that I have together already, so that you can see things like how to put corrugated paper into your drawings, and so it simulates that wonderful ridge. And by putting that ridge of the corrugated paper into your drawing, there's so many different things you can do to that. You lay a wash of paint over it. Sometimes, depending on how that paint applies itself, it might dry in the valleys between the raised ridges of the corrugated paper. It might not. If you lay it down flat, you can also do a light dry brushing over top of that to give a weathering effect to those surface edges. You can flat stamp letters into it, like you'll see I've done earlier. You can gesticulate really loosely over top of the corrugated ridges with a pencil crayon and get enhanced values in there that way. There's just so many different things that every one of these different surface modulations allows us to have in our images. I like that a lot. I'm a huge proponent of that, and I'm a huge proponent of experimentation, because you never know what you're going to get in anything you do, whether it's Zipatone, whether it's applied color fields of acrylic or watercolor, whether it's different textured papers, whether it's like this is another piece of paper I'm going to put down. When you serrate, when you bend and fold and then peel off a watercolor sheet from a book, there'll be that top little line that has the other half of the pre-cut serration on there. Well, when you take that and you put it on your paper, and I'll show you right here, when you go over that surface, it gets you twofold things. It either gets you this fantastically jagged line on the actual paper itself. I'm sorry, the camera's not picking it up. But it also gives you this wonderful jagged line if you trace along it, or if you just run the pencil over it on the paper as well. You adjust that paper or adjust that piece and affix it down an inch over, or a couple of measurements over of any kind, and you got this fantastically clear and consistent space in between the two lines. But it's clearly not a straight line. It's clearly this adjusted line on both sides. It's just stupid things that play. Yeah, I do a lot of that over the years. And so by playing that and by exploring that stuff, it sort of gives you an awful lot of insights and details into ways that you can find out all kinds of new things that you may well not have considered before. And if I can advocate as strongly as possible for people to try this, for people to explore these things, especially if you're finding yourself feeling like you're having some kind of block or just anything whatsoever holding you back from working. Allow yourself to explore this. Allow yourself to try something different in order to, find a method of mark making that you didn't have before. Here's part 3. I've got more I can keep doing if people are finding any of this in any way advantageous for them. I don't mind doing this. It's fine for me. I've got to put some time in on Village Haunted now this afternoon. I'm trying to keep up on this release date for this next book. The course I'm moving at right now, there should be 4 books out this year, from stuff that I completed last year and stuff that I'm completing now. So this is going to be a good year, but it doesn't. None of this really happens unless we keep working. Anyhow, I hope this stuff helps people out. I will scan all of this when and post it up on the same 2 Facebook and Instagram pages that I have been doing with the other 2 pages. If you want to go back through this video, if you're joining late, and see some of the other examples that I've shown, please do so. Or if you know anybody else that might find benefit of this, and if you don't mind, telling them to come and check this out, this might help them out in their creative journey. If you want to take some kind of copy of these pages that I've done, that I've posted on Facebook and Instagram, go for it. Why do I care? These could be of help for you, and if you're finding yourself in a mental block and you've got some kind of printout of this kicking around in your space that you can go, oh, well, maybe I'll try gluing some canvas down and working on that texture area for this part of the picture. Whatever. That's it. You can find great benefits in that. Yeah. All right. So, thanks for letting me know that, Phil. Well, either way, I'm recording these things, so even if you can't make it to these live streams, then please take a look at the videos, and because I do try to spend the entirety of my time here walking through all this, and I got to get back to work on projects. So thanks for joining me today. I'll be back tomorrow at 2:00 again. Have yourself a great one, and enjoy some creating. Bye for now. We'll talk soon.